Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
There are a couple of chunks of text in this parsha that are put together. One group of chunks is the story of Balak and Bilam. So this is, as you might recall, the talking donkey story, which I just had very little patience for this week. I just was like, I just don't have any patience to dig into a talking donkey. I just don't. So I tried to make it interesting with midrashim about, the one of the 10 things created before God starts creating the world. One of the things created is the donkey. I just couldn't. I don't know. I wasn't there. All right. So I want to look at two pieces, thought pieces by two scholars, and related to a line that we get from Bilam's not only refusal to curse the people, because he oddly is not Israelite and has been called to curse the Israelites. We'll see in a second, but says that he can only do what God tells him. So he's going to listen to God, which is interesting. So that means he's up there with Yitro and like other folks who have a relationship with God, Hagar, other non-Israelites who seem to have a relation with the true God, Yud He Vav He of Israel. So for that, I like it, right? That is, it's not just Israelites or Jews who could be in touch with God. It's everybody. So we're going to take one line that he says about the people Israel as a blessing instead of a curse. And we're going to look a little bit at two pieces related to that. And if we have time, some Hasidic teaching, which is extremely creative around making this speak to us, because otherwise it's hard to take a tale like this and have it necessarily speak to us. There is a Bilam attested to outside of the Torah. So we have an ancient inscription with the name Bilam the seer. So we believe this is probably a story from another tradition that gets incorporated into Tanakh, and it gets incorporated into Torah. And if you read the oracles of Bilam, like what he actually says that come from God, there are 4 of them. And if you just look at those, it tells the whole story. So there's one theory that it was an ancient poem, and the poem is the original text, and then stuff to explicate the poem gets put in. That gets expanded, and then we have that put into Torah. Okay. The text around it, right? It gets inserted in the book of Numbers between all this stuff, and there's different scholarly arguments for why it goes here, because it doesn't have anything to do with any of the chapters surrounding it, other than that they are encamped at the plains of Moab. So that's the only link we have to the chapters around it. So it's a standalone set of texts. And then the tradition has a impulse to yuckify Bilam. So the tradition does not like Bilam. The rabbis don't like Bilam. So there's nothing here that says he's anything other than a true prophet of Yud He Vav He. So there's nothing in our text to make him anything less than someone who's truly doing his best to say what he believes God is telling him to say. But traditionally, Bilam is seen as an enemy of the people Israel, and that his blessings aren't really blessings. They're kind of wishy-washy, which means they could be turned a different way and could actually be a curse. And we're going to see that with the verse that we look at today. All right, so enough of me talking about it. I'm not going to read the whole story. We're just going to hit a highlight of this. So Balak is a king of Moab and has witnessed the Israelites being successful in a battle, and is freaking out that they are going to be an enemy of the king, and that they are going to beat his army in battle. And so he calls for the famous Bilam, the seer, to curse the people. And Balak says, I can only do what God tells me. And so Balak talks to God, who answers. That's what makes part of this story interesting, is that God answers. And Balak says, Balaam says, I can only do what God tells me. God says, if he comes back for you, this Balak guy or his emissaries, go with him. But you can only say what I tell you. All right. So that's where we're picking up the story. So Balak says to Balaam, when I first sent to invite you, why didn't you come to me? Am I really unable to reward you? So he's miffed that Balaam didn't come right away. But Balaam said to Balak, and now that I've come to you, have I the power to speak freely? I can utter only the word that God puts into my mouth. And here the word for God is Elohim. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiryat Chutzot. Balak sacrificed oxen and sheep and had them served to Balaam and the dignitaries with him. Right? Whenever you're going to have one of these major rituals, you have a sacrifice and you have a communal meal. In the morning, Balak took Balaam up to Bamot Baal. From there, he could see a portion of the people. So Balak, takes Balaam the seer up to the high place of Baal, the god Baal, right? Who they worship. And from there, he could see Kitzeh Ha'am, a part of the people. Balaam said to Balak, build me 7 altars here and have 7 bulls and 7 rams ready for me. Quite extravagant. Balak did as Balaam directed, and Balak and Balaam offered up a bull and a ram on each altar. So that's 14 animals. Then Balaam says to Balak, stay here beside your offerings while I'm gone. Perhaps God will grant me a manifestation, and whatever is revealed to me, I will tell you. And he went off alone. God became manifest to Balaam, who stated, I have set up the 7 altars and offered up a bull and ram on each altar. And God put a word. Now this is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Right here, the name for God is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. God put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak and say the following. So he returned to him, found him standing beside his offerings and all the Moabite dignitaries with him. Right? Balak is the king of Moab. He took up this theme and said, now here's the oracle. Here's the first oracle that we believe might be an ancient poem, a verse of the ancient poem that is the origin of this story. From Aram has Balak brought me, Moab's king from the hills of the east. Come, curse me, Yaakov. Come, tell Israel's doom. How can I damn whom God has not damned? How doom when God has not doomed? As I see them from the mountaintops, gaze on them from the heights, there is a people, Am levadad yishkon, that dwells alone. Uvagoyim lo yitchashav, who is not reckoned among the nations. Okay, that's the verse we're going to look at. Okay? But for now, we're going to go on. Who can count the dust of Yaakov, number the dust cloud of Israel? May I die the death of the upright. May my fate be like theirs. Then Balak says to Balaam, what have you done to me? Here I brought you to damn my enemies, and instead you have blessed them. And he replied, I can only repeat faithfully what God puts in my mouth. Then Balak said to him, come with me to another place from which you can see them. You will see only a tiny portion of them. You will see them and damn them from there. Meaning, okay, you saw too many of them, so they look too formidable. So if I take you to where you can just see a tiny portion of them, right? So he takes them to Sdei Tzofim on the summit of Pisgah, where again they build altars and they make offerings, and Balaam goes to seek the word of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and again Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh appears and says to return to Balak and speak thus. Now we get the second oracle. He went to him and found him standing beside his offerings. Balak asks, what did God say? Here's the second oracle. And he took up his theme and said, up, Balak, attend. Give ear unto me, son of Tzipor. God is not human to be capricious or mortal to have a change of heart. Would God speak and not act, promise and not fulfill? My message was to bless. When God blesses, I cannot reverse it. No harm is in sight for Yaakov, no woe in view for Israel. The eternal, their God, is with them, and their sovereign's acclaim is in their midst. God who freed them from Egypt is for them like horns of the wild ox. Lo, there is no augury in Yaakov, no divining in Yisrael. Yaakov is told at once, yea, Yisrael, what God has planned. I love this. Lo, a people that rises like a lioness, leaps up like a lion, rests not till it has feasted on prey and drunk the blood of the slain. We're talking about enemies and defeating enemies and being defeated by Israel, and Balak wants Balaam to curse them so that they won't defeat him. But of course, Balak is saying exactly the opposite is going to happen. Balak is not happy and says, okay, how about this? Don't curse them. but don't bless them. And Balaam says, I told you, whatever God says, that I must do. So Balak says, I'll take you to another place. And maybe God will say it's okay that you damn them from there, that you curse them from there. So he takes Balaam to the peak of Peor, which overlooks the wasteland. Balaam said to Balak, build me altars. He builds him altars. They offer animals. And Balaam looks on Israel and camped tribe by tribe. The Spirit of God came upon him. And what does he say? Word of Balaam, son of Beor, word of the man whose eye is true, word of one who hears God's speech, who beholds visions from the Almighty, prostrate but with eyes unveiled. Matovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Yaakov, your other kinds of tents, O Israel. Right? So this is what we say when we enter a synagogue. The rabbis chose this verse, spoken, oddly enough, by someone sent to curse Israel. This is what we say when we enter a synagogue. Matovu alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael, like palm groves that stretch out like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by God, like cedars beside the water. Their boughs drip with moisture, their roots have abundant water. Their ruler shall rise above Agag, their sovereignty shall be exalted. God who freed them from Egypt is for them like the horns of the wild ox. They shall devour enemy nations, crush their bones and smash their arrows. They crouch, they lie down like a lioness who dares rouse them. Blessed are they who bless you, accursed they who curse you. So now Balak is really upset, and he says, you blessed them 3 times, and Balaam's like, look, I told you from the beginning, this is what I can do, and that's all I can do. And he gives a 4th oracle, but not the bookshelves that I'm ordering for my office. And so he gives a 4th oracle that is also, something positive. And then Balaam set out on his journey back home, and Balak also went his way. Okay. So that's our story. I did not read the donkey part. Like I said, it's just too much, too long. So here we have a non-Israelite prophet or seer, somebody who's gifted in the art of blessings and curses, right? So both have equal power. If you can bless and it works, then you also have the power to curse, right? And both work. Words, remember, in the ancient world, especially in ancient Israel, certain kinds of words, once they are unleashed, have their own power, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. Here, Balaam is saying, I can only do what Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is going to allow me to do. I can only say what Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will allow me to say. And 4 times has an oracle rather than a curse that comes out as, like I said earlier, what we think is a blessing, but the rabbis want to equivocate and say, well, really? Is it really a blessing? So whatever. But that's a whole nother conversation. It starts in the Targum. It goes into Onkelos. It goes into the Talmud. It goes on forever. But I want to go to 2 pieces that look at this verse, Am levadad ishkon. A people alone dwells. Now, this is one of the places the rabbis say, how is that a blessing? That this people will always be alone. And so that's where a lot of the commentary starts saying, well, is that really a blessing? Balaam is covering his butt because he actually wants to curse the people, but God won't let him. So he comes up with these wishy-washy, lukewarm brachot that are actually not brachot. But it is a verse that needs some explaining. Like, we can't just say, Am levadad yishkon, and get it that that's a blessing, right? That a people alone will dwell who is not, yitchashev, is not considered among the nations. So let's see what that means, how people have dealt with that in our tradition. First, I just want to look a little bit, not a lot. I just want to look a little bit at our original commentators that we always go to. And we're going to look, as always, we're going to start with Rashi. What does Rashi say about it? Rashi says, that's from the top of the rocks, but this business of the people that shall dwell alone. Rashi says, this is what their ancestors have given them as a prerogative, to dwell in the world alone, as is the sense given to the passage by the Targum. Lo, this people is alone, destined to inherit the world. Interesting. That's how Rashi translates it, based on the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the Torah, and shall not reckon itself among the nations. Understand this as the Targum does. They will not be exterminated with the other nations, meaning all the ones that God's going to wipe out in Canaan. They do not come under the same reckoning with other nations. But there's another explanation. When they rejoice, no other nation rejoices with them. Right? That's what it means, but they are not considered by the other nations, that when good things happen to Israel, nobody else is happy for them. That theme stays around for a while. Let's see including to today, let's see what even Ezra says when it's about this business among being alone. He's basing it on these words from the top of the rocks. It's a parable symbolizing the decrees that come down from heaven. For Balaam in his wisdom saw that this nation would stand alone and not intermingle with other nations that would overpower her and try to force her to give up God's Torah as the nations did. Okay, so that is what Ibn Ezra says it means to dwell alone, that they are not going to be seduced by the cultures around them that are going to ask them to give up observance of Torah and mitzvot. God forbid. All right, so we see this tendency to both see it, but everyone wants to see it as a blessing. Right? In the final analysis, they are the only people who will eventually populate the earth. This concept is repeated by Moshe in Deuteronomy. God will guide him alone. Okay? It will be impossible to destroy them. So the instinct for all of our commentators is to see this as a good thing, that Israel will dwell alone, meaning she'll be unique, meaning she will be the last people standing, meaning her destiny is different. She will not be wiped out as all the Canaanite nations will. So the instinct from Rashi, so from the Middle Ages, early Middle Ages forward, is to try to see this in some way as a blessing because it's in Torah and because it comes from Yud He Vav He. You can understand why our sages would want to understand this as a good thing if God is saying it about Israel. But it gets complicated as you go more through Jewish history and experience anti-Semitism in different forms. It gets harder and harder to understand this as a good thing, including now, right, in the times that we're living in now. And so I want to look at two contemporary commentators on this verse. One is Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, the beloved and of blessed memory late chief rabbi of London, and Mijal Bitton, Dr. Mijal Bitton, a Hartman scholar who I just love learning with, who is a sociologist. She's a PhD in sociology, studying Sephardic Jews of America. So we're going to look at those two and see how much time we have left over. Okay. Let's look at Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who brings some interesting other Jewish historical commentary on this. He brings that forward. It's a great article, but I don't have time to read it all with you. So I'm going to start here. Here's our verse, right? He's quoting the Netziv, who is working with our verse. The Netziv says you should read our verse thus: if it is a people content to be alone, faithful to its distinctive identity, then it will be able to dwell in peace. But if Jews seek to be like the nations will not consider them worthy. That's how the Netziv translates our verse. They won't be considered among the nations means they won't be considered like the other nations. They will still be seen as different if they try to matriculate, right? If they try to assimilate. So now we're talking, this is Lord Sacks talking now, Rabbi Sacks. This is a highly significant statement given the time and place in which it was made, namely Russia, in the last quarter of the 19th century. At that time, many Russian Jews had assimilated, some converting to Christianity, but anti-Semitism did not diminish. It grew, exploding into violence in the pogroms that happened in more than 100 towns in 1881. These were followed by the notorious anti-Semitic May laws of 1882, realizing that they were in danger if they stayed. Between 3 and 5 million Jews fled to the West, many of them being our grandparents, right? This is the wave of Russian Jewish immigration that populated much of what is now Ashkenazi Judaism in the United States. It's this wave. There's an earlier wave in the 1860s from Germany of wealthy Jews coming to, do business in the States. And then the poor Jews of Eastern Europe arrive in the 1880s, looked down upon, by the way, by the earlier wave of migrants, Jewish immigrants from Germany. It was at this time that Leon Pinsker, a Jewish physician who had believed that the spread of humanism and enlightenment would put an end to anti-Semitism, kind of like people thought might happen in America in a democracy, experienced a major change of heart and wrote one of the early texts of secular Zionism called Auto-Emancipation. In words strikingly similar to those of Netziv, he said, in seeking to fuse with other peoples, Jews deliberately renounced to some extent their own nationality. Yet nowhere did they succeed in obtaining from their fellow citizens recognition as natives of equal status. They tried to be like everyone else, but this only left them more isolated. So as Jews gave up their attachment to nationhood, that was supposed to make them more like equal citizens of whatever nations they were, nation states, of course, given our current history, nation states that they were a part of, but it didn't work like that. It did not work like that. And we know this, right? We know this. All right. Something similar happened in Western Europe also. Far from ending hostility to Jews, Enlightenment and emancipation merely caused it to mutate from religious Judeophobia to racial anti-Semitism. No one spoke of this more poignantly than Theodor Herzl in his piece from 1896, The Jewish State. We have honestly endeavored everywhere to merge ourselves in the social life of surrounding communities and to preserve the faith of our ancestors. We are not permitted to do so. In vain are we loyal patriots, our loyalty in some places running to extremes. In vain do we make the same sacrifices of life and property as our fellow citizens. In vain do we strive to increase the fame of our native land in science and art, or her wealth by trade and commerce. In countries where we have lived for centuries, we are still cried down as strangers. If we could only be left in peace, but I think we shall not be left in peace. The more we succeeded in being like everyone else, implied Herzl, the more we were disliked by everyone else. Consciously or otherwise, these 19th century voices were echoing a sentiment first articulated 26 centuries ago by Ezekiel. And so Lord Sachs brings that forward. We want to be like the nations, like the peoples of the world who serve wood and stone, but what you have in mind will never happen. He goes on to say anti-Semitism is one of the most complex phenomena in the history of hate, and it is not my intention here to simplify it. But there is something of lasting significance in this convergence of views between Netziv, one of the greatest rabbinic scholars of his day, and the two great secular Zionists, Pinsker and Herzl, though they differed on so much else. And what is that? Assimilation is no cure for anti-Semitism. If people do not like you for what you are, they will not like you more for pretending to be what you are not. Jews cannot cure anti-Semitism. I want Jews to hear this. Jews cannot cure anti-Semitism. Only anti-Semites can do that, together with the society to which they belong. The reason is that Jews are not the cause of anti-Semitism. They are the objects of it. But that is something different. The cause of anti-Semitism is a profound malaise in the cultures in which it appears. It happens whenever a society feels that something is badly amiss, when there is a profound cognitive dissonance between the way things are and the way people think they ought to be. People are then faced with two possibilities. They can either ask what did we do wrong and start to put it right, or they can ask who did this to us and search for a scapegoat. In century after century, Jews have been made the scapegoat for events that had nothing to do with them. And it goes on, right, even to today. Jews have always been the irritant of empires because of our insistence on the dignity of the individual and his or her liberty. Anti-Semitism is either that last gasp of a declining culture or the first warning sign of a new totalitarianism. God commanded our ancestors to be different, not because they were better than others, but because by being different, we teach the world the dignity of difference. Empires seek to impose unity on a plural world. Jews know that unity exists in heaven. God creates diversity on earth. What think you? What do you think?
Just amazing and valid and true. And please post a link.
100%. Yeah, really powerful. and a refusal on Rabbi Sachs's part to be defeated by the rampant, nature of anti-Semitism, and the fact that it doesn't go away, and the fact that it was even worse when we tried to assimilate, and including now.
And the fact that he is Lord High Rabbi.
Correct, right? So he is someone who has gained one of the highest titles you can gain in the secular, the non-Jewish society he's living in, and he's preaching but he stayed observant, right? He stayed true to his Jewish identity, and belonging to the Jewish people was his primary identity. It's Rabbi Lord Sachs, right? All right, Robin, you're itching to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am. It's funny. I just read this yesterday because I do read a lot of his work. And he also said that Jews need to be proud and of our heritage and our religion and everything about ourselves, because Gentiles respect us more than if we say, oh, I wasn't brought up Jewish, I don't know that much, I'm really not into it. They don't like that. They like it more if you are, involved and proud of it. And that's what we have to do. Not be afraid. Stop being afraid. Be courageous. And I know I've told you before, my husband isn't Jewish. I have a lot of friends who aren't Jewish. And first thing I tell them is, I'm Jewish and I observe. And they all know it, and they've known it for years, all my life, and it works because they're the ones I heard from on October 7th.
Interesting. So the language that he uses for what you're saying, Robin, he wrote a whole book on it called The Dignity of Difference. And so what you're indicating is that when we try to fake it, we just come off as inauthentic. When we go ahead and live proudly our Jewish lives, and I would say our liberal Jewish lives, we don't have to observe according to someone else's standards to be legit. If we go by our own progressive liberal Jewish values and practice, and we do that proudly, what we demonstrate and what we bring forward and embody is dignity, the dignity of difference, and an authenticity that he believes generates respect, right? The dignity of difference. We model it. And in modeling that, we encourage and inculcate dignity for us, as how people regard us. Yeah. Nice. Okay. Bert?
I wanted to make 2 points. One, kind of bouncing off what Robin said, is how public we feel comfortable about being Jewish. So I'm in Paris. I have a chai. I wear it, but I don't wear my shirt open so it's visible, although I guess it is a little bit. And that question becomes, I think, that a lot of us face when I've lived my whole life in a Jewish cocoon. I grew up in New York in a very Jewish neighborhood. I lived on the west side of LA, again, very Jewish. But when we move out into the wider thing, how comfortable are we? And there's one thing, pride, and the other piece is danger. And no one would want to put themselves in danger. So that's something I think we all face. The other thing I was going to mention, and I ran into this, we ran into a couple somewhere. Started talking with them when they were Christian, and we said we were Jewish. And I asked the question I often ask of Christians is, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? It's very interesting to ask people this question. Even many Jews who don't know the answer to that question. The answer to the question, depending on who you call Jewish, somewhere between 14 and 17 million, would you say, Amy? Is that about right?
Yeah, something like 14.
Somewhere. Depending on who you call Jewish.
Yeah, exactly.
And who self-identifying, whatever. Okay. When you ask otherwise intelligent people that question, I mean, I got from this couple the biggest number I'd ever heard. They thought it was probably about 2 billion. No, I'm sorry, it was 1 billion. It was about an eighth of the population of the world. Or if you ask people how many Jews there are in there. So the answer to that, and it comes back to what Rabbi Sachs was saying, is you don't need Jews to have anti-Semitism. And in fact, many places like Hungary, where there are very, very few Jews, there's a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism. And so hiding or Jews not being there doesn't really accomplish it.
Yeah, it doesn't have much to do with it.
Judith?
Am I unmuted? Yes, I am unmuted.
As a convert, I have a slightly different take on this perception because I have been asked so many times, why did you do that? And in some cases, I've been told, you're not like other Jews, which has always been my chance to say, what do you mean by that? I like to make people look at what it is they think a Jew is. And when they say, what makes you so different? I said, it's so simple. And I believe that we should treat people the way we want to be treated and that our egos are not the center of the world. Then the question goes, what about Jesus? Jesus was a good Jew. He was a Jew. And my heroes in many cases have been Jews. My belief system defines who I am, and I want to live the system that I believe is the purest and cleanest of them all.
I would add, if Jesus was Jewish, what about his mother?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was a question that came up a lot, Bert, because having grown up in Texas on farm country, the idea of immaculate conception just didn't go anywhere with me. But come on, I've seen too much in my life on the farm to even think about that. It was just, maybe his mother was Jewish and she knew something we didn't know that we'd like to know.
So with those images in our head, let's go now to I want to look at Mijal Bitton's piece. She's writing today. Rabbi Sachs, of course, is deceased. But here's what she says. And here's the link to her piece. And again, this is a portion of the article, not the whole thing, because we don't have time to go through the whole thing. Among his most enduring lines is this description. It is a people that dwells alone and is not reckoned among the nation. That verse has echoed through Jewish memory for generations. Some read it as a badge of honor, our sacred capacity to stand apart. Others see it as a marker of divine chosenness. And some hear it as a warning that our difference will always leave us isolated. The power of the text, she says, is its ambiguity. Bilam's blessing reveals the double-edged nature of Jewish distinctiveness. It can provoke admiration or alienation, blessing or persecution, sometimes all at once. As a mother, I've come to think more and more about this paradox. I want to raise children who understand Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, who move through the world with dignity and delight, who learn to make Judaism visible and beloved to others. But the past 2 years have awakened in me another resolve, to raise children who can face the world's anger without flinching. I want them, and she's in America, I want them to have the courage to be despised for their commitments and the strength to live a Judaism that aspires to reveal the ways of Torah as paths of loving kindness. How can I teach them both to be a part and part of the world? This same paradox haunted Simon Ravudovitz, the 20th century Jewish philosopher that she wrote about in another piece. He was a Polish-born philosopher who settled in the U.S. and wrote in the shadow of the Holocaust, understood both the beauty and the cost of Jewish difference. He argued that Franklin Roosevelt's famous 4 freedoms used to justify America's entry into World War II were missing a 5th. Libertas differendi, the freedom to be different. So where Sachs is talking about the dignity of difference, here Roosevelt is talking, and our guy is quoting, the freedom to be different. For Rawidowitz, this wasn't an offshoot of other freedoms. It was foundational. The right to live as distinct individuals and groups with distinct practices and beliefs without justification or apology. He quoted Bilam's line from this week's parasha about the Jewish people being a nation that dwells alone to affirm that Jewish distinctiveness is essential to who we are. Jews have insisted on being different even when the world has not forgiven us for it. But crucially, Ravudovitz did not see Jewish particularity as a rejection of others. On the contrary, it becomes redemptive when paired with the defense of everyone's right to be different. For him, Jewish distinctiveness is a public good. Our apartness is not a wall, it is a witness. We carry our particularity not to withdraw from the world, but to safeguard the dignity of difference itself. So she arrives at the same place as Sachs. That orientation feels especially urgent now. Ravudovic's response to the paradox of Jewish difference, are we part of the world or apart from it, was not to resolve it, but to live it, to embrace a set of commitments that remain in tension. Here's how I've come to see that tension. We must have the courage to be despised for our loyalties, but we must not stop there. We are also called to aspire to be beloved, not for the sake of acceptance or popularity, but because we are commanded to make God's name beloved in the world. As Ravidovitz wrote, do not try to hide the different inside you. Carry it with open pride to yourself and to the world. I'm writing this at a moment of uncertain anticipation when we're all waiting to see if the war in Gaza might finally end. We pray the hostages will return home, that families will, please God, stop burying their sons and daughters, that the Palestinian civilians caught in this nightmarish war will, God willing, find safety and peace, that perhaps, please God, from the wreckage, seeds of normalization and greater peace between Israel and its neighbors might still emerge. But even as we hope for some closure, rebuilding, and peace, we must prepare for the challenges ahead. Here in America, we Jews will continue to navigate a political landscape where both the left and the right pose real dangers to Jewish safety, and both Israelis and Jews connected to Israel will face a world that is increasingly hostile to both Israel and to Jews. This will require fighting new battles in public diplomacy, in building bridges, in finding allies, and in fighting for our rights. For these wars, we'll need to draw on both strands of our inheritance to embody what Bilam himself glimpsed, a people who can stand apart without growing hard, who can remain different while still radiating moral light. Our task will not be simple. We must protect what is ours and offer it as a gift, survive difference and sanctify it, raise children who know how to stand tall in the face of contempt and who still dream of being a blessing. We need the courage to be despised and the strength to be beloved. Boom! Mijal Bitton, people. A prophet for our time. She's just learning with her is such an honor and privilege. She's so inspiring. And is someone who doesn't flinch away from the realities of what anti-Semitism looks like right now, the cost that it could mean, that the Jewish people pay, that Israel's paying, that the Palestinian people are paying because of the people who are using them in this. And she just does not shy away from how difficult and complicated it is without being willing to give up 1 inch of hope and trust and positivity, that leaning into our tradition, leaning into our distinctiveness, having that inspire us and inspire those we come into contact with is the only way we will come through this. Bert?
I think this has become, at least for me, a lot more complicated with what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Mm-hmm. And the distinction or not between anti-Israel feeling and anti-Semitism, and the whole idea of wanting to stand apart and have pride. I think for many people, it's difficult to have pride in some of the things that Israel's doing. I wonder if you could comment on that. I'm sure it's something that I'm sure weighs on every Jew.
Sure. So the line between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is a interesting and weird one and not easy to suss out, because the people who are anti-Zionist and or anti-Semitic have their own definitions of who and what they hate about Jews. Is it Jews? Is it Israel? Is it Israel and Jews? But what we know is that anti-Zionism has nothing to do with Israel's governmental policies. Anti-Zionism is a belief. It's an ism. It's a belief. It's a belief system that says we anti-Zionists believe that Israel does not have a right to exist as an independent Jewish state. That's a belief. That's what anti-Zionism is. As a Zionist, as a liberal Zionist, I have a serious problem with a lot of what Israel's government is deciding to do. A lot of problems. And as an ardent Zionist, I have been openly critical when in Israel, and demonstrating in the streets along with lots of other people holding an Israeli flag. And guess what? We learned from that, because those of us who were at the No Kings protest, for the first time, what you saw was American flags. Used to be if you saw an American flag, you made all kinds of assumptions about the white nationalists who are carrying them. But we learned from the protests in Israel that because we are patriots, we are in the streets, right, talking and protesting and demonstrating against what our government is doing. It is the same in Israel as a democracy, that people have the right to be on the streets speaking out against what the government is doing. So they're very different things. Supporting political decisions, policy decisions, decisions about war and whatever, those decisions are very different, and our criticism of them, if we have such, are very different from anti-Zionism. Thanks. Acronym for ism. I separate myself, right? There you go. All right. So sorry, that was kind of a long answer. Susan?
Ever since November 7th, I've worn my Sefaria shirt and my 2 other Jewish shirts in public a lot of time, hoping to provoke a conversation, and no one has ever asked me about it, which seems, I thought I'm not going to go up to a stranger and say, hey, I'm Jewish, what do you think about? But it just seems like if I'm wearing a Sefaria shirt or the KI shirt with the star or the Rabbi shirt, memorial shirt with the star, at least someone could ask, even someone hostile. And I don't get it.
You don't get why people aren't commenting?
Yeah. I mean, even if somebody wanted to be hostile, it'd give me a chance for a conversation about it. I don't get it.
You're walking around in the wrong neighborhoods.
Some of this is in the Village Green, which is sort of in the heart of Black Los Angeles.
Well, in a way, it makes me hopeful that people are not out there hungry to engage in a nasty way about it. So that's,
I want to say, Susan, it's all online. It's all online. I looked at it, and I couldn't stand it. And it's all on X and it's all on TikTok. And that's how people are getting all this out.
I know you don't look at that at all.
They're not confronting. You're saying what I hear you saying is that they're not confronting Jews in real life. They're choosing to express it online.
A lot of people aren't speaking to strangers ever since COVID. And I can guarantee that. You could walk around with God knows what on and no one will say anything. So trust me on that one.
All right, Rachel?
Yeah, I'm going to put something forth that's a little bit controversial because I have a teenage daughter. My teenage daughter wears a very large Star of David, but calls herself an anti-Zionist. Now, okay, so at first, after October 7th, and I say this as someone who, again, I mean, I could list for you all the things in terms of the Netanyahu government that I hate. I could list them and I could talk to you about them intelligently. Like, this is not just an opinion, right? Even so, I was like, how can that be? Like, I struggled with this emotionally and really had a hard time when she was saying this. Now, granted, she's only 16 and this could change. Then I picked up a book by someone, I think his name is Noah Feldman. It's called To Be a Jew. And it was written fairly recently. It was published after October 7th, but he wrote it before. And one of the things he does is he talks to Jews across the political spectrum, religious spectrum. I mean, he talks about every level of observance, and he makes an interesting case for how young people, when they are engaged enough, and I'm not talking about somebody who just picks up a label and adopts it and doesn't know a thing about it, but I mean somebody who is young and actually has thought it through and then calls themselves anti-Zionist, let's just say lowercase z, okay, for lack of a better term, that person is identifying their Judaism in relationship to Israel, which is, I had never thought of it that way. And I thought, okay, so what they're doing is they're simply saying that all of that, because my generation, Israel represented like a democracy in the Middle East. It was the hope, it was the place that was less discriminatory. It was hopeful. It was when my generation started to watch that, erode, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to grapple with it. We are very conflicted and pained. And that this younger generation, they don't have that conflict. And their response is to be anti because they are relating in reaction to, again, defining their Judaism in relationship to Israel, just like my generation is, but in a way that for them is protesting what they see there as injustice.
All right, so I want to stop there. I have a lot that I would say about this, but
I'm sure you do.
Keep y'all way past time. But what I want to say, a couple things. One is, I hope that's how she comes to an anti-Zionist stance, is that it's a Jewish expression of her understanding her Jewish values as being in direct opposition to the idea of a Jewish state. Okay, everyone has a right to their opinion. So I don't trust that that's where it comes from. Because I trust that they are rooted in Jewish values. They are listening to JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, and other folks, and they are playing identity politics. Our kids are grabbing on to identities that come through politics, that includes the politics on the left, the politics of oppression, and the politics of brown people being discriminated against, including in the Middle East and by the oppressor Israel. So I'm not convinced her anti-Zionism is coming from a Jewish place. I really am not. If it is, fine. I can, obviously I'm going to disagree with lots of Jews about lots of different things, and that's fine. But my concern is that it's not coming from that. It's coming from the garbage they're being fed on far left.
I know.
Which is all about cancel culture and all about you can't stand up to that and all about there's no nuance and all about you can't say yes, but what is Israel supposed to do? What's Israel supposed to do? Like, wait, what would you do if it were Mexico shooting, coming over the border and massacring Americans? What would happen? So it's like there's no room for that nuance or that conversation. And I'm not saying that means therefore you should be Zionist, but at least hold the complexity of the situation that Israel finds itself in. And they can't do that. That's what tells me it's not a Jewish decision.
Right. Yeah. No. I know. I've been through this. Is what's in my head all the time. I know.
So, and again, I'm not trying to be judgmental about it. I'm just saying.
Oh, no. You're fine. You're
true. There are some people I deeply honor and respect as rabbis who are anti-Zionist. And they come to that through their Jewish values. I wholeheartedly disagree with them and value their right to come to a Jewish decision that's very different from my own. I don't trust it with a six in our culture. I just don't. The rabbis I argue with, we can have that discussion and that argument. Fine. And we'll quote Torah, throw it at each other to do it. That's fine. But my daughter, when she hears some of the stuff, she says to me, Mom, they don't even know what they're talking about. Yeah. And she's not saying she knows either. She's like, I don't know enough to get into a conversation about it, but I do know they have no idea what they're talking about when the ardent anti-Zionist. So that's what I'll say about it for now.
No, I appreciate that. I really, really do, because it's hard. It's struggle.
Heartbreaking and it's hard, and it's
very, very difficult.
It's very difficult, and it's not going to get easier anytime soon, right? So getting educated is one way, but they have to be ready and willing to see other perspectives in order to even evaluate whether or not it speaks to them at all.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday Morning Torah Study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.